It was yesterday at this time when State Representative Dixon McMakin reminded us that there is such a heavy emphasis being put on insurance at the state capitol going on right now in the session. And it was a nice little reminder that maybe we won't need a special session for insurance. A lot of movement going on. We get to catch up with our insurance commissioner every so often, and we do that right now. Tim Temple's in with us. How are you, sir?
Hey, good morning, Brian.
I'm going to bring this around this way. So.
There we go. Yeah, good morning. Another busy week. We were just saying last night, it seems like week 6 at the Capitol, and it's only starting week 2.
Okay, has it been moving that fast? Have you been getting that much, that much, how much can go on at once? I think that's the best way for me to ask the question.
Yeah, well, look, I think you're seeing that the legislature is moving extremely quickly. They started hearing bills, day 2 after opening session. Right. So all focused, there's a lot of focus on insurance reform, as we all know. We need focus on insurance reform. Mm-hmm. And we're certainly getting the committee hearing times for sure.
Are we rowing in the same direction? Does there seem to be not necessarily consensus, but enough movement behind the right bills to make sure that the package is advancing?
Look, a lot of things are moving on the House side already, and a few on the Senate too. But I mean, the focus has been on the House. Yesterday in civil law, there were over half a dozen bills. I think maybe 8 bills that came out with and I need to say that with token opposition. These are insurance, for the most part, insurance reforms bills trying to address legal reform. And, I think one red card against these on most of the bills. So, you got to ask yourself the questions, is this being set up for, the big showdown over in the Senate in Senate Judiciary A, which we know last year, where a lot of the bills went and died.
It died. And that's not unique. Things go to Jude A to die.
They do.
Is there a way to either make Jude A better or have them go somewhere else?
Well, look, I think right now it's representative government. You've got, people that they were sent there by their districts for whatever their focus is for that district. Mm-hmm. And what we're hearing overwhelmingly is they want insurance reform. So mm-hmm. I think if people vote their districts, vote good bills, kill bad bills, then we'll be okay. But this is the legislative process, and it doesn't always go the way you think you want it to. But look, we're giving it a good fight. Like I said, the attention and focus, not just here at the Capitol, but around the state. People are actively engaged in what's going on at the Capitol, and I think that's a good thing.
A few years ago, when we started talking tort reform, I want to say back in 2019, 2020. It was before you were elected, but there was a definite insurance versus lawyer mentality. I feel like that mentality has lessened a little bit, and I don't know if y'all are fully listening to each other yet, but it's not where it was at a fever pitch of a fight before. How would you describe the back and forth when it comes to both sides?
Well, I think people are now starting to realize that, look, it's easy to be angry at your insurance company, and mm-hmm. it's easy to fault the advertising attorneys yes. because you see them all the time and all that, right? So it's been easy to kind of make the distinguishment between those two,
right.
Now that we've had, and I want to give credit to the House and Senate last year when they started having these hearings that we did starting last January, talking about the cost drivers. Why is insurance so expensive in our state? Why does it cost more? Why does a claim cost more to either settle or pay mm-hmm. in the state of Louisiana versus other states? Cost drivers. What makes that cost so expensive? Now that we're starting to talk about that, and more people realize they're not as angry at the insurance companies, even though, look, I get it. People have bad claims experiences. So let's not diminish from that. But the fact that they realize that insurance companies are paying claims unnecessarily, the ones the fender benders, mm-hmm. the ones we heard the lady on who did LPB, her $47,000, her foot slipped off the brake at a stoplight. She rolled into the car in front of her. Her insurance company paid $47,000. People used to be upset at the company because they paid $47,000. Now they are starting to understand why the company has to pay $47,000 because they can't defend themselves in court.
Right.
They can't bring the information that they need to defend you, the mm-hmm. driver, and not pay that claim. So there's less impetus on the insurance companies. Although, look, I'm not giving them a free pass.
No.
Right. But people are starting to understand where the dollars are going. And I think we've been saying that on your program for a long time. Follow the money mm-hmm. and see who's making the money.
Mm-hmm. Twice as many medical claims.
Twice as many.
That coming from the governor's press conference.
That's
twice
right.
as many
Look,
medical
and
claims.
look, the governor and I agree on. There's a lot of things we agree upon. We agree upon the fact that we don't have a frequency problem on accidents.
Right.
We agree that it's not the cost to repair the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
We agree that we have twice the bodily injury claims.
Right.
We agree that we have twice the litigation rates.
Yes.
So, I mean, let's focus on why that is.
Right.
And
the
let's fix it.
The problem isn't uninsured drivers either.
It's not. It's a contributing problem. It's
But
it
not
contributes,
overall.
but is not a major driver. And look, we've got legislation that's going to address uninsured motorists. No play, no pay. There's some bills out there with illegal illegal immigrants driving and things like that. All of these things can help add, but they're not major contributors. So we got to again, if we focus on things that truly. And again, I got to come up with something better than move the needle. I use it. I hear everybody else use it. I'm worn out on moving the needle, but we've got to do things that actually make a difference.
What can make a difference on the medical claims, on the injury claims? Because our frequency of injury claims. Look, this is the governor had a press conference for the session. This was the chart he used, and I'm showing you that right now. And that big yellow line at the bottom, which was on our Facebook page a while ago. But that big yellow line at the bottom is your frequency of injury claims, us versus the rest of the nation. What can actually be done there?
Yeah, well, look, there's a couple of good bills last week that got out of the House. Should be coming to the House floor hopefully soon. Modified comparative fault, and that's one that most people, when you tell them, you explain if you are responsible for creating the accident more than 51% at fault.
Yes,
then you don't get to recover. If it's your fault, then you shouldn't be able to sue somebody else for that.
Right.
Modified comparative fault makes sense to everybody I talk to.
Yes.
Medical transparency. We've been talking about that. It's been referred to for years as collateral source because that's the legal doctrine behind it. But it's medical transparency. You collect what your healthcare provider billed you. I'm sorry, what they paid, not what they billed you.
Right.
Big difference in those numbers.
I still don't understand why. Like, how did we get to the point of where you could have two numbers like that? Is it because of separate insurance claims, or it's a separate ball game?
I don't know. And look, there are other states that allow very different variations of that.
Yeah.
But I think we've just taken it to an extreme here in Louisiana.
When I get a bill from a hospital, I've never looked at it as a negotiating ploy. Like, okay, that's your first offer. That's not the way it works.
Well, we in Louisiana, we get creative down here.
I understand.
There's a no play, no pay bill.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like I said, if you don't, law requires you to carry auto insurance. You're driving around and you don't have it and you get in a wreck, you shouldn't be able to recover.
Right.
Everybody else is being financially responsible and you choose not to, but yet you can recover these large amounts. That's not right. So there's some bills going, working through the system. But Brian, and look, numbers are important and they help tell a narrative. And we started looking at bodily injury claims filed by state. And I've got a report, and it's through the NAIC, National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and it shows over a 10-year period, but the most recent year being 2021, Louisiana had 66,000 bodily injury claims filed. Okay, just could be a big number, could be a bad number. You got to put it in context. Here's the context. We have 4.5 million citizens in the state. So let's compare us to Alabama.
Okay.
5 million citizens in their state. They had 34,000 bodily injury claims.
Okay.
Okay, let's compare us to New York. 5 times the population, 19 million people. They had 60,000 bodily injury claims, 6,000 less than we do. So we have a problem in this state. We've got to address it. And look, I've started saying this too, because a lot of people, look, there's stories and positions on every side, and people, you can't take away people's rights to litigate and all that, and that's not what we're trying to do. But I think we need to acknowledge that if that's the system that we want to live in, if we want to allow people to claim bodily injuries for dang near anything,
right,
then we're going to pay for it. There's a cost for that freedom, if you will. If we want to be able to litigate for anything and claim bodily injuries for every broken fingernail, we as citizens are going to pay for that system. And we're currently paying for that type of system.
Medical transparency would go a long way on that front. However, I don't think it wouldn't completely close it out. It's the jackpot justice that we have. the idea that we look forward to the slip and fall, like the idea that that's cashing a check. How do we get to the bottom of that rabbit hole?
Well, I mean, it's a business model, and again, because the current laws encourage and promote it, so we need to bend that. We need to change that, and also we need to start messaging that that's again, if that's what we want, if that's the environment we want to live in, then that's the premiums that we need to be expected to pay. If we don't want that, we don't want to be paying the highest auto rates in the country, then we need to modify our own behavior as well as, the system that allows that type of action to take place.
I'm kind of walking us up to Kim Carver's bill about advertising.
Okay.
Because that to me, that will go a long way. If you can modify the advertising, and I don't want to limit free speech, but I do want full disclosure in the advertising.
Yeah.
I don't, if you're holding a big check that looks like you just won the Price is Right, I want to know, you want medical transparency? I want billing transparency as well, to say, like, if I'm holding up a $500,000 check, how much am I actually taking home? Because to me, there's honesty in that.
And is the person holding up that $500,000 check the person that took home that $500,000 check?
Right.
I mean, you've got all these, paid actors, and look, I tend to think that the people that receive these bigger settlements, that and there's ones that are certainly earned and just, but the people they're not the ones that are smiling and jumping and down. I see all the time these people start sending me these, whenever verdicts come in, and it will be like the claimant and their attorney firm, their team, and all of the attorneys are all smiling. And then you got the claimant that's sitting in a wheelchair or whatever. Right. They're not smiling, right? But yet on TV, you see it's all happy smiles and faces, and and so I think that we need to have more transparency in that. Kim Carver's bill, I like the intent of it, but I saw an article yesterday that it's already saying that they don't think it's going to be, it's
well, that's because they asked a lawyer about a lawyer's advertising. I've actually got that written down to talk about later on in the show.
And again, I don't know if it's going to be, if it passes legal muster or not, but it is a good, valiant effort. We need to have the discussion. We need to start it. It's not certainly a reason not to do it.
Look, if the side of a cigarette package can tell you that product potentially causes cancer, then it should be included that check in the commercial might not be the amount you actually take home.
And there are states.
How about results may vary? Can we include that?
And I think they actually put that on some of those advertisements. But no, and I know there are some states that do like I call it a waterfall. It shows the amount awarded, and then how much the claimant got, how much the breakout.
Yeah.
Who took home what. So we need more of that for sure.
Okay. Well, we also need is more of you here in studio along the way. I know we generally try to keep up every month, but there's so much. We didn't even talk about homeowners. We didn't talk about anything else.
No, and look, we've got some good bills moving on that. We just real quick, we got one bill. We're going to extend the period that insurance companies have to notify you if they're going to non-renew your home. We want you to have more time for that.
Yeah.
Why they're non-renewing, some transparency on where the money goes when you pay your premium, what the breakout is, what goes to, everything, expenses, taxes, profits, losses. So we're trying to bring more transparency for the consumer so that they know how they're being treated by the insurance companies, and again, hold them accountable as well.
Well, then let's do a follow-up less than 2 weeks from now. I'll get with you offline, but we want to make sure that we're up to speed on all of it as it moves forward. He is Insurance Commissioner Tim Temple. We always appreciate the time, sir.
Thank you.